Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Society of Humanist Philosophers for giving me this opportunity, and I would like to thank everyone who helped organize this debate, especially Anthony Battaglia. I'm also very pleased to share the stage with my friend Dr. Phil Fernandes, who I've known for at least 9 years and who I know will prove a formidable opponent today. Today you've been asked to think about two very different ways of interpreting the world, naturalism and theism. By naturalism, I mean the belief that there are no supernatural beings. If naturalism is true, there is no God, no devil, no angels, no heaven, and no hell. Naturalists include people who call themselves atheists, materialists, secular humanists, and skeptics. By theism, I mean the belief that there is an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good being called God who allegedly created the universe and transcends the world, yet is immanent in it. Now, the topic before us is, when you weigh the evidence for theism against the evidence for naturalism, which way, on balance, does the evidence point? In defense of a naturalistic answer to that question, I'm going to present 8 lines of evidence which are more likely given naturalism than theism. Number 1, naturalism offers the best explanation for the physical dependence of minds. Michael Tooley, a highly respected philosopher at the University of Colorado at Boulder, has stated 5 lines of evidence in support of this claim. First, certain injuries to, or diseases of, the brain make it impossible for a person to have any mental states at all. For example, think of someone in the final stages of Alzheimer's disease. My slide shows the difference in brain tissue between a healthy brain on the left and one with Alzheimer's on the right. Second, when an individual's brain is directly stimulated and put into a certain physical state, this causes the person to have a corresponding experience. Third, other injuries to the brain destroy various mental capacities. Which capacity is destroyed is tied directly to the particular region of the brain that was damaged. Fourth, the mental capacity of animals becomes more complex as their brains become more complex. And fifth, within any given species, the development of mental capacities is correlated with the development of neurons in the brain. In light of the evidence I just presented, Paul Draper, a highly respected agnostic philosopher, concludes that, quote, consciousness and personality are highly dependent on the brain. Nothing mental happens without something physical happening, end quote. But that strongly implies that the mind cannot exist independently of physical arrangements of matter. And this is exactly what we would expect if naturalism is true. However, if theism is true, God is a disembodied mind. God's mind is not in any sense dependent on physical arrangements of matter. But if nothing mental happens without something physical happening, that is evidence against the existence of any being who is supposed to have a disembodied mind, including God. Therefore, the physical dependence of minds is unlikely if theism is true, and that's the first reason why I think naturalism is true. Number 2, naturalism offers the best explanation for the relationship between complex and simple living things. According to the National Academy of Sciences, there are 5 scientific facts which support evolution. Since my time is limited, I will discuss only 3 of those facts: the fossil record, biogeography, and molecular biology. First, the fossil evidence indicates that complex living things are the gradually modified descendants of relatively simple living things. Negatively, the fossil record disconfirms creationism. It shows that living things were not simultaneously created. We only find simple living things in the lowest layers of the fossil record. As we move forward through history, we find fishes, then amphibians, then reptiles, and then birds and mammals. Positively, the fossil record contains transitional forms. For example, we now have fossils documenting the evolution of the whale. Obviously, the artist put some flesh on the bones in my slide, but the bones show intermediates, such as the animals in the top right and bottom left of my slide. They had functional hind legs and could move on land like seals, but they also propelled themselves, as whales do, by moving the tail up and down. Finally, in the bottom right, you see a fully aquatic early whale. We've even found fossils of early whales with hind legs that were structurally complete, but too small to actually function. Second, evolution explains the relationship between geographical barriers and living things. For example, although land mammals could survive in Hawaii, they are not found there natively because they evolved on continents and couldn't cross the Pacific. Or consider the continents of Australia and South America. Again, although, say, apes could survive on either continent, apes evolved after the continents of Australia and South America broke away from earlier land masses. Third, evolution explains the genetic similarities and differences between different species. For example, the genes of present-day humans and chimps are 98% identical. But it's even better than that. Human beings and chimps even share something called pseudogenes, genes that are not functional today, but apparently served a purpose in the past. The most plausible explanation of these genetic similarities and differences is that all living things share a common ancestor. Now, if evolution is true, then God is not needed to account for the various life forms that exist today and have existed in the past, and therefore evolution is compatible with naturalism. If theism is true, however, evolution may or may not be true. Evolution is logically compatible with theism. God could have used evolution, but God could have used many other methods than evolution, methods which are ruled out by naturalism. Moreover, given that 99% of the species that have ever lived on Earth are now extinct, evolution seems like a pretty strange way for an all-powerful being to create living organisms. Did God have to keep experimenting until he got things right? Thus, evolution is some evidence for naturalism over theism. Number 3, naturalism offers the best explanation for the biological role of physical pain and pleasure. Suppose you are hiking in the forest. As you come over a steep hill, you discover that there is a blazing forest fire headed your way. Since fire is painful and potentially deadly, you would avoid the fire at all costs and thereby increase your chances of survival. The naturalistic explanation for this is obvious. If human beings are the products of evolution by natural selection, we would expect physical pain to aid survival. But of course, not all physical pain and pleasure is biologically useful. For example, consider the following description of the pain and suffering caused by Ebola. Within days of infection, Ebola patients suffer from soaring temperature and excruciating joint and muscle pain. The throat is so sore that swallowing anything, including one's own saliva, is intolerable. The skin becomes like soft bread. It can be spread apart with one's fingers and blood oozes out. Victims choke as the sloughed-off surfaces of their tongues and throats slide into their windpipes. Every body orifice bleeds. Even the eyeballs fill with blood that leaks down the cheeks. In the final stages, victims become convulsive, splashing blood all around as they twitch, shake, and thrash to their deaths. Ebola, according to science writer Richard Preston, is a perfect parasite because it transforms virtually every part of the body into a digested slime of virus particles. If there is a God, don't you think he could let Ebola victims suffer just a little bit less? If we had the power to do so, we would immediately alleviate their suffering. After all, if theism is true, God could fine-tune humans so that they experience pain only when it is necessary for some greater good. But if they're going to die anyway, what possible reason could God have for letting Ebola victims experience such agonizing pain until death? The chances that such a reason would intersect with the biological goal of survival, well, it's pretty slim. On naturalism, however, we would expect people to feel pain, even when the pain will not aid in survival. Evolution by natural selection is not an intelligent process. On naturalism, there seems to be no way for creatures to have evolved so that they only feel pain when it will aid survival. Therefore, the biological role of pain and pleasure is more likely on naturalism than theism, and that's my third reason for believing that naturalism is true.